So the first thing you're going to encounter when you read a piece of music is the clef, and this lets us know what the notes on the lines and spaces are going to be. If you see this little swoop here, it's on the second line, which is G4. That's the G above middle C, because middle C is C4 right in the middle of the piano, and this lets us know what everything on the staff is going to be. Now, guitar is interesting because it's a transposing instrument, so everything is actually written an octave above what you play it as. And that's just kind of understood how you read guitar music, but technically it should probably be written with this octave below symbol, which means it's written in treble clef, but you're supposed to play everything an octave lower than it's written. The next thing you'll see notated is the key signature. Right now there's nothing there because C major has no sharps or flats, but if you were in G, you'd have one sharp being F sharp. So this lets you know that every time you see an F on the sheet music, you're supposed to play F sharp because that's how G major works. And if you need to know how many sharps and flats are in each key, Guitar Pro actually has this nice little thing where it lets you know how many sharps are in each key, which is super easy to memorize it. Or you could look up a chart called the Circle of Fifths. I know, the Circle of Fifths, my third eye. I see a lot of you guys acting like Nick Cage and National Treasure over this, but I don't get it. It's just a chart that lets you know how many sharps and flats are in each key. So look it up if you need to know that, but it's not going to tell you much more than that. The next thing you're going to see is the time signature, which lets us know how many beats are in the measure and the value of that note. So 4/4 being the most common means there's 4 quarter notes in the measure. So you'd count it 1, 2, 3, 4, new measure. If it was 3/4, there'd only be 3. So 1, 2, 3, new measure. If it was 6/8, that means there's 6 eighth notes, so you'd count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are kind of the common 3 that you're going to see as a guitar player starting out, unless you're getting into some Dream Theater stuff, but probably not as a beginning sheet music reader. And now that we know what some of these symbols mean, the time for Every Good Boy Does Fine and Face has arrived. So while these sayings are helpful for when you're learning this stuff as a kid, clearly, because I still remember them, I think the easier way to teach an adult is just that everything goes up by a letter. So if you got the first E on the first line of the staff, the next space is going to be F. I almost typed F on the keyboard. Next line, going to be G. Next space, A, so on and so forth, up into the ledger lines, which it's actually a good segue. So on ledger lines, so if we go back to that first E on the first line, following the same formula, the first space below the staff is going to be D, and then the first ledger line below the staff is going to be a C, and it just goes on and on and on. Open E string would be way down here. I get it, ledger lines are a little bit difficult to understand at first, but they're just a continuation of the staff for notes that won't fit on this, because the whole goal of reading sheet music, or sheet music in general, is to make your ideas as easily communicated as possible. I understand that it may not look that way at first, but sheet music is actually very, very well laid out and easy to understand once you get into it. Next, we got this little triplet feel thing, and that just lets us know that the rhythm is supposed to be swung feeling. So if you have a quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a straight rhythm, your rhythm would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and in a swung rhythm, it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So like a blues kind of shuffle feel. Next, we got this little free time symbol. So, you know, if you're too artsy to follow measures, you just gotta have your freedom. This is what you would put, and that just lets you know that just all bets are off for the timing of things. And I should probably circle back a bit to just kind of how measures actually work. So like I said earlier, 4 quarter notes per measure. So if we just 0, 0, 0, baby, chug, chug, chug. You'll see once you get to the 5th one, you're now in the 2nd measure. So if we play it, no, don't play that one, play from the beginning. So we get to that 5th one, we're in the 2nd measure. So just to clarify in case anyone wasn't clear on that. Moving on, we've got our double bar line, which you can think of as that big ass block in Mario Party that goes, huh! In front of you when you're trying to go places. It just lets you know that the section you're on or the piece of music as a whole, donezo, no more. So this next part might be a little confusing just because there's like a million ways to do this, but let's write in some chugs. So if you had this and you actually wanted it to play 8 times instead of 4, you could just go in and write it again. And then it would sound like this. But like I said earlier, with sheet music being easy and concise and just trying to make things as clean as possible and easy to read, you could just put this symbol in the next measure, and that lets the reader know that you want to repeat what came before it. And similarly, if you wanted it to repeat more, you could put the double sign there, and then it'll play. And like I said, with there being a million ways to do this, if I get rid of these symbols here, you could also put a repeat sign, which is this guy over here. There's a repeat open and a repeat close. I'll come back to the open, but if we put the repeat symbol here and say I want it to play 4 times, it'll put a little 4x here, and this lets the reader know that you want it to loop 4 times. And then you see after the 4th time it moved next to the next bar. Now this repeat open thing, that will be like if you have measure 1 plays, and then from measure 2 and 3 you want repeated, you would put the repeat open sign at the beginning of measure 2 and the closed at the end of measure 3, so it lets the reader know that this is the section that you want to loop. So just kind of think of them as like loop markers in your DAW. And that's kind of the easiest way to think about that. Next, we've got these little octave modifiers. So if we have the open E string, you may have seen these in your DAW, by the way. 8 VA, you play an octave above what's written. 8 VB, octave down. 15 MA, 2 octaves above, and 15 MB, 2 octaves down. So say you wanted to notate this open E string on the staff instead of the ledger lines, you could put it on that first line and notate it with 8 VB. And this is most helpful if you have like a passage, a ton of notes that are all on the ledger lines. Like I said, sheet music tries to make things easy. You could notate it all on the staff and then just put a modifier across the whole measure that lets the person know that you actually want that played in a lower octave. And before we move on to the next section, it looks like we're actually losing daylight because I'm a piece of shit musician that wakes up too late. So I'm gonna put some lights up, we'll come back. And we're back with our Laker-themed lighting. Now you may be asking yourself, why is this dude wearing a basketball jersey to teach me about sheet music? And honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe it reminds me of a time in my life when I was popular, in shape, and actually had a future before guitar robbed me of all that. But that is not your problem. What is your problem is you don't know the value of these notes yet. So starting first with the quarter note in 4/4, that's what will get the pulse. So we just have 4 of those per measure. So pretty simple. It's how you would kind of tap your foot along to that 120 tempo. And then a half note is going to take up the space of 2 quarter notes. So we're only going to be able to fit 2 of those in the measure. Cool. And then a whole note would be equal to 4 quarter notes. So we'll only be able to fit 1 of those in the measure. And then we'll get into the smaller subdivisions, the 8th note. So there's going to be 8 of them in the measure, hence the name. And then we're to the next measure. You can think of it as how a hi-hat kind of keeps time with the drummer playing it. Then 16th notes, our shred note. 16 will fit in each measure. And then it just keeps going. 32nd notes would be double the speed of that, and 64th double of that, which you wouldn't honestly be able to do at this tempo. Next, we've got our rest symbols, starting with the quarter note rest, which means you will not play for a quarter note. Half note rest, also known as slash top hat, means you don't play for a half note. Upside down slash top hat means you don't play for a whole note. And I'll throw like a little diagram on the screen of all these in a second, just so I don't have to go through all of them, waste your time. Now we'll look at our dotted note values, which means you play the note that is written in duration plus half of that. So normally a half note would take up 2 quarter notes. You would add one more, totaling 3, since 1 is half of 2. And then we've got room for one more quarter note in the measure. So 1, 2, 3, 1, next measure. And then after that, we've got a double dot, which means you would add another half to that. So if the first dot's adding 1, which is a quarter note, the next dot is going to add an eighth note. So the whole note will be worth 3.5 quarter notes, or 3 quarter notes and 1/8 note. And I'll write in something like maybe this, just to make it easier to hear where this pops in at. Not the tritone. Okay, so it'll be like 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and down to the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So hopefully that makes sense. You can look more about double dotting if you're, want to know all the values and stuff of all the notes. Definitely look up any of the stuff, because I'm just flying through this as quickly as I can. There's, if you want more in-depth info on a specific thing, you really should, just do some research on Google on that. Next, we've got our triplet bracket, which means you're going to place 3 notes in the same space that 1 quarter note would normally occupy. So I'll write this out. You'll know it when you hear it. And let's get these are going to be 8th note triplets. And Guitar Pro probably won't let me loop this, so we'll use something we already learned earlier. Nature's loop sign, the repeat sign. Let's just loop this 4 times. Let's hear how that sounds. So you've heard triplets a ton if you didn't already know what they are. Next, we've got our tied notes. So if we write in a bunch of quarter notes, normally these would just sound as 8 quarter notes in a row. But say we wanted those, the first and second quarter note of the second measure to actually just be sustained from the previous quarter note, we would select these, tie them together, and now beats 1 and 2 of the second measure, or 5 and 6 if you're counting as just 8 beats, would just be that note sustaining over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So hopefully that makes sense. Just tying notes together, exactly what it sounds like. On to the flat, natural, and sharp modifiers. So we're in the key of C. Let's write in a G. And if we wanted that to actually be played as a G flat, we would add in this little flat modifier, and that lets the person know that you're supposed to actually be playing that as a G flat. A double flat would change it down to F. In C major, you would definitely not write it that way, since there's already a F in the key, but in some situations you will need to write things as a double flat. For the natural sign over here, let's actually change the key signature to something with a sharp already in there. And normally in G major, when you see an F on the staff, you'd actually be playing that as F sharp, because F is not in the key. But if you wanted the person to play an F, you'd add in the natural sign, which natural means anything that's a sharp and flat, it goes. It just becomes the actual letter of the note. So in this case, it would go from F sharp to just an regular F, or F natural, whatever you want to call it. Then we've got our dynamic indicators from quietest to loudest. As an amateur musician, this should be very easy for you to remember. If you're someone that likes to play quiet, you probably got a little P, 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 then a P, P, then a normal P, then an M, P, then an F, then an F, F, then an F, F, F. And then sticking with that same theme of dynamics, to round it off, we have a crescendo, which is going to be playing quietly to loudly, like someone on a floor tom. Decrescendo, exact opposite, loud to quiet. And that's it for the sheet music section of this. The rest is basically tab-based stuff, which is helpful. Tab and sheet music together, I think, is a great combo. Tab by itself, not so much. See if there's anything else here. Yeah, so you might see something like, instead of writing out, like if somebody wants you to play a measure of G major as quarter notes and then a measure of C major as quarter notes, sometimes it can be easier than, I don't know why I'm doing the fucking Trump hands right now, but the goal is to make things easy. So instead of writing out all the notes of G and then all the notes of C and writing them as quarter notes, you might see somebody just write a chord diagram above things, and it'll say like G major above this measure, and then C major above here, and then it'll just have the rhythmic value, Trump hands again. It'll just have the rhythmic value of the quarter notes that it wants you to play. So it's just easier and quicker because, again, that is the point of sheet music. So I think that's about it. Hopefully this took away a little bit of the mystery of reading sheet for you. And if you have a specific question that I didn't cover here, drop it in the comments and I'll catch you guys in the next one.